Aloha, my name's Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is financial advantage. Think wealth, build freedom. And my special guest is Bronson Hill, CEO and founder of Bronson Equity, keynote speaker, and host of the Mailbox Money Show. Bronson has raised over $20 million in real estate investments and is also general partner of over $150 million worth of multifamily properties across the United States. A former medical device consultant turned real estate expert, he now helps people build passive income and rethink wealth. He's also the author of the upcoming book, Rich Brain: How the Wealthy Rechange Their Brain to Change Your Bank Account. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, Anna. It's really great to chat, and I love your battleship. I need to get a battleship like that in paradise.
Absolutely. So to get us started, tell us a little bit about your professional journey. I mean, starting in medical sales and ending up where you are, it seems how did that come about?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, either have a corporate job or working. I was working hard, was making good money, and just started to say, I want to have more control over my time. I was making, over 200,000 a year, which was a great job, and my family all works in education and other sorts of kind of secure jobs. So I was wanting to leave, and they're like, "Wait, hold on, why would you want to leave your great job and go do something else?" And so, but I was really, I heard this quote by Warren Buffett, who I really think is our generation's greatest investor. And it says, unless you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. And I thought a lot about that. I was like, well, that sounds awesome, but it's like making money while you sleep. Well, that's like, it just changes everything, right? It's not just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So what happens if I can't do so? What happens if, God forbid, I become disabled, or if a family member needs help, or if I want to spend more time traveling or doing other things, which is really, people say they want financial freedom, but really it comes down to time freedom. So I went on a path, learned about real estate, started raising money for deals, started partnering with people that had a money problem. Not that they didn't have money, but they had money. They didn't like the volatility of the stock market, and we were looking for cash flow. And so we learned about investing in real estate and now other assets such as oil and gas and other things that really cash flow really well. So that's kind of a little bit of my journey. I was able to author this book behind me, Fire Yourself, which kind of talks about my journey, and just I've had over 2,500 conversations with millionaires, and just, what is it that they need to learn about investing in real estate or other alternative assets, and to start generating cash flow so that you can fire yourself.
Wow. And so you fired yourself, and then did you go back to school to learn how to do this investment, or you just kind of learned on your own?
So I kind of learned on my own. I mean, there's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so I had a mentor that kind of showed up, was at the right time, and said, "Hey, let me help you figure out how to do this." And so raising capital, now we raised almost $50 million from different investors. And it's basically a sales skill to do that. And so I realized, like, oh, I have 10 years of sales experience. Maybe I could kind of use this and go over here. And so I started to actually generate more wealth or more income in doing the investing side than I was in my regular job. And so that's what inspired me to want to leave. And I actually had made a decision. I do want to stop doing the medical device sales, because it was a grind. A lot of jobs can feel like a grind, or that if you are a high earner or you work corporate, you're a number. You're just somebody who fits into this big corporate machine, and it just feels very impersonal. And there were perks of it too, of course, as well. But it was just, last year I traveled 6 times internationally. I did Nepal, I did India, I did the base camp of Mount Everest, like the hike up to there. And so, like, just being able to actually do those things that feel like bucket list things that are always someday. But then once you actually create a plan and you find a way to become financially free, then you can have the time to really plan for these things that you really want to do.
Wow, that's really, really, really interesting. So, how, I think a lot of people think, oh gosh, investing in real estate, how am I ever going to afford to be able to invest in real estate? What do you say to them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A lot of people, like, we know we should be like doing real estate. It can feel like, oh my gosh, it's getting so out of hand, and real estate prices are so high. And if I only bought so many years ago, then it just feels like, man, I wish I'd done this sooner. But in reality, there's always, and I'm not somebody who's it's real estate or nothing. I think there are different investments that make sense at different times. I think right now, honestly, in real estate, it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time to find anything that cash flows. And if you, hopefully make a lot of money someday in an investment, I think that's okay. But I think having cash flow, pretty quickly in a deal, whether it's a business, a real estate, a oil and gas, other type of deal, that's huge because it reduces your risk in the deal. You're starting to get money back sooner. It also allows you to reinvest that. It also, you can live off of it. So if you had to, you can have money coming in that's actually supporting your lifestyle or supporting what you need for your expenses. And so I think for a lot of people, it feels like, oh, it's just, there's so much, it's way off. But I think that, there are ways to do it sometimes for not a lot of money. And some people, $50,000 is a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money for a lot of people. But if you have a net worth of several million dollars, it's doable to figure, okay, I'm going to put some money in a deal. I'm going to learn. And again, where the goal is not just growing the wealth, but it's really growing yourself. I think I just rhymed there, but it's really growing the wealth, growing yourself. It's really, it's the investment that you make in yourself as you're doing it. Because when I'm invested in something, I pay attention, I learn, I ask questions, I'm doing all these things. And so I think that for a lot of people, it's small steps, and a lot of times, getting to local meetups where they talk about real estate, going to conferences, listening to podcasts like this or other, there's a lot of investing podcasts and shows and books and things out there. So I think it's just continue to learn, get around people that are doing it. And that's a way that you'll kind of like pretty soon the light will go on, like, oh, hey, here's what I should do. And it'll kind of, your path becomes clear over time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I always think we always hear the saying that, like, you buy a house, it's like a money pit, right? And because constantly things are breaking, and you have to invest in the real estate, and then you get a renter, and there's a lot of risk there. Are what is your recommendation to people? They investing in groups so that they mitigate their risk, or are they actually investing on their own property and having to
Yeah.
take that burden?
Yeah. So going back to that idea of passive income, there's a lot of kind of misnomers about what passive income is. So people think, oh, if I buy a rental house, then I'm basically passively investing. If I have an online business, if I'm doing online trading with stocks, and these really aren't none of those are passive. And really the test is if I couldn't 10x the current number or the amount that I was putting into these things in a short amount of time, then it's not really passive. So for example, at one point I had four single family rental houses. And I had a property manager there in another state, but I was getting every single week, I was getting calls, I was getting emails, we need to replace the toilet, the tenant's not paying, the city's upset about the yard. I mean, it was like, even though I wasn't doing it, it was a headache, right? So if I couldn't quickly go from 4 houses to 40 houses, and that involves like finding the houses, putting offers on them, maybe doing some work on them for year rent, it's overwhelming. That becomes a whole nother job. So I think it's this idea that there are investments that are more passive, right? That are things that like you do some work, your work really, no one cares about your money the way you do. So nothing's fully passive, but I think it's the sense of like, I can vet a team and I can vet a deal and I can look and say, well, what are the ways this could go wrong? Or what are the upsides here? Or what, are there other investors that have, we're gonna just kind of do some diligence around it. And then once I choose, okay, I'm actually going to send funds, I'm actually going to invest with this group, then I'm hands off, right? I'm not the one who's doing it, right? Somebody else is getting those calls, right? Somebody else is actually, and it becomes much more efficient, right? If you get a 100-unit apartment complex, you have one roof, you get one set of plumbing, you get a discount on labor, usually a full-time person just kind of maintaining the place. It's usually only a few paint colors, so same appliances versus you imagine 100 houses, somebody's going to Home Depot, they're getting the part, they're coming back, they're going, it's a lot of back and forth. And so I think when you can pull things together and you can have somebody else actually doing the work. But again, I think it's important to determine if you have more money than you have time, then being a passive investor where you invest in a deal like this could make a lot of sense, right? Because you're basically putting money in and somebody else is helping making sure that performs. If you don't have money, like when I started, I didn't have a lot of money. So I said, well, let me help people that, have a money problem. Not that they don't have money, but they have money and they want to try to find a way to make it work for them. And so I was able to raise money and help. And that's kind of how I started as well. So there's the active side of a little more doing it yourself. But I think it's really important to clarify your goals, what you want, and then start to move towards that.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of like the classic 1031 exchange, right? Like my mother, for instance, I grew up in Aspen, Colorado, and over COVID, prices soared in Aspen because
Yeah.
all the billionaires wanted to, get out of New York and other places like that. So
Right.
we were able to sell the house, and instead of doing like a classic 1031 exchange, she, was able to convert it into some DSPs, which is it kind of similar to that, what you do?
A DST, a deferred sales trust. So they put it into a place where they could transfer it. Is that what you're
It was
referring
like a
to?
1031 exchange, but it like, with multiple buyers, so you didn't have to have one property.
Yeah.
Had
Yeah.
multiple parts of portfolios, and kind of like you're saying, they're managed and just gets a return versus, but there's a lot of tax savings there.
Exactly. Yeah, there's strategies like that. So I have a relative who's been doing multifamily investing for 30 years, and he started with a duplex, and then he went to an 8 unit, and he just kept taking equity and 1031 or exchanging into different deals, and now he's got 2,000 units, and he, tens of millions of dollars in net worth, and it's like he just did that over time, and it's just deferring taxes. So yeah, I mean, if you have to sell, that's the challenge with stocks and other investing, as long as you sell every time you have a transaction, versus if you can hold real estate or you can hold other tax advantage things like oil and gas is actually amazing one a lot of people don't realize. It's one of the few investments that people can invest in and they get about 80 to 90% year one, tax reduction against ordinary income.
Wow.
So it's kind of wild. So it's basically like if I make 200,000 a year and I invest 100,000 in an oil gas drilling deal, depending on the deal, it's really typically around 80 to 90%. So 80 to 90,000 it would show I made 110 or 120,000 for the year. So on the front end, that might save me what, like 20 to 25,000, depending on my tax, bracket, just on the front end of what I would have paid in taxes before the investment has returned anything, right? So it's kind of like there are things like that that really, and we know people that actually, one of the chapters in my book, I'm not a CPA, I'm not giving any specific tax advice, a little disclaimer, but I have a chapter in my book that says reduce your taxes potentially to zero. And I went from a 25% taxable rate to about a 1% taxable rate, right? And there's ways you can do it. There are different types of investing. And I mean, the 1031 example you gave is a great one. There's all kinds, there's like 20 or 30 different great tax strategies people can use to help reduce their taxes.
Wow. So, what are some of these, strategies that you're going to be releasing in your rich brain, like how the wealthy change your brain to change their bank account? I love that title.
Yeah, yeah.
Our listeners can do like today to start changing the way they think.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the one thing I've realized in having all these conversations, this actually happened. There was a conversation I had in an Uber in Texas. I overtook I was taking a phone call. A woman, somebody was wiring $100,000 to invest in a deal. So I'm taking this call. So this Uber driver, of course, they're just kind of hearing this. You imagine Uber drivers in taxis hear all kinds of conversations. And so as I hung up the phone, she was probably a woman, early 30s. She said, "How do I learn about money? And how do I do?" And because she could just tell, like, obviously she's with somebody who's kind of dealing with lots of money. And so I just kind of thought about it. I was like, I don't really know quite how to, because the problem is I can tell you how to make money. The problem is if you don't realize how you're self-sabotaging or you're doing behaviors that are actually preventing you from creating wealth, then, even if you learn things about the tactics, you're gonna, it's gonna prevent you from getting there. So, one thing I learned in this, and this is a study that Fidelity Investments did in 2019, there's this belief that people are either born with money, they're born with a silver spoon in their mouth, trust fund babies, or they're not. Like that's kind of the belief, right? But actually, the facts from the study show that 86% of millionaires are self-made,
Well,
right? 86%. So that's almost 9 out of 10 did not inherit it. Weren't gifted it. They figured out, they learned a way to do it. They learned through teachable, learnable habits and mindsets. So anyway, there's a lot around that. I think one of the most valuable things that I learned was the idea of wealth worthiness. And it exists in other areas of life as well, but particularly around wealth, where a lot of times people will, the person who makes $100,000 a year will just consistently find a way to make $100,000 a year, or somebody who makes $1 million a year will find a way to make a million. And most people do is they kind of stay where they're at. They slightly regress. They go from 100,000, now I make 110, or I make 125, incremental improvement over time, and they'll grow it over time. Or you have cases like mine where I had a $200,000 net worth and I went to a $4 million net worth in 4 years. Right. Well, how did that happen? Well, it happened because I changed my mindset and my worthiness that I felt I was worthy of around wealth. And then I started becoming that person. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I was able to step into that versus being somebody who self-sabotages. Right. And that one example of self-sabotage, we all know this, like if I'm a single guy, and let's talk about relationships for a minute here. If I'm a single guy, I walk into a friend's house on a party, I see a beautiful woman there and I want to go talk to her, but my self-talk is, "Oh, you're not good looking. She's never going to like you. You got nothing to offer." Well, how's that conversation going to go? Right? It's probably not going to go very well. It's probably not going to happen at all. But if it goes, it's not going to happen. But it's the same thing with wealth. And so it's really important how we talk to ourselves, not just like affirmations in a mirror, but what we whisper to ourselves in those moments, because it does really affect how we show up. And so every, people I've studied, did quite a bit of study of people that are worth over $10 million, almost every single person had some sort of daily mindset practice that they did. Right. So I think it's something that a lot of people think mindset work is weird, except for highly successful, motivated people that are very successful. So those are the people, that's kind of weird I want to be, right? Like, so. Yeah.
Also, do you ever watch Lewis Howes, his podcast?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of his and a big meditator, like Joe Dispenza and you're 100% right. It's so interesting. Before I knew about, I was always someone who manifested, but didn't really know much more than I would just think a lot about what I wanted to do and I would get it. But it's just with even getting clients that you even though you want a new client in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, do I have the time for this client? Right, and then starting to you're projecting that you are busy even though you want it, right? And
Yeah.
so some of those learnings I think are really, really critical. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it exists with wealth too. I mean, this happened. I'll give an example. So I have been telling myself and visualizing, seeing myself as this 10x person, and Napoleon Hill in the book Think and Grow Rich, which is a great book if anybody's interested about this topic. And he says, spend 30 minutes a day thinking about the person that you intend to become. Right now, that's a lot of time, but it sounds like you're doing it. But you're basically creating this person, and then what happens is, I had a deal come around. This was probably last August, almost a year ago, and came around, and it was way bigger than what we've done. It was a different type of deal. It was like, but it would about 5x our business. And I kind of initially passed on it. And then my partner was like, hey, let's think about whatever. And I honestly would have passed on it. But because I had been doing some of this work, I was like, oh wait, I realized I've been passing on these things that are totally within my reach, even though they're 5x or 10x where I'm currently at, right? And so because of the work I did, I was actually able to receive that. Went under contract with it, and we were able to raise the money. Unfortunately, we didn't actually end up closing on the business, but I love that it was a win because I was actually able to receive it, and I did everything we could to be able to do it. So like, I love that, like, just the expansion that happens when you open yourself to becoming that new person.
Absolutely. And I know, like Dr. Joey says, like the one thing that you say to yourself, it's like the I'm worthy. Right? I'm worthy of greatness and I'm destined for greatness. And those really they even in the water in your body, it's responding to that
Yeah.
and changing shape. So that's really some good tips there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think we're constantly, and again, around wealth, a lot of people think it's just simply doing the things that wealth involves. Oh, I do this, I make this investment, and those things that do happen, those things happen. But a lot of times, people that inherit wealth, people that either inherit from either they win the lottery or from the death of the rich uncle or something. A lot of times they don't know how to manage it. They haven't become the person that's a wealthy person, right? So it goes like it goes be, do, and have, right? You become the person, and then you start doing the things that a wealthy person does, and then you have the stuff. Everybody wants to just have. Like, I want to win the lottery. I want to, I want to, prayers, God help me show me, let me show you that winning the lottery won't spoil me, right? Like, just like we want to just have the stuff, but it really involves becoming that person, doing those things, because that's how people that are wealthy, they not only maintain wealth, but they grow it, and they find causes to believe in, that they give to. And so but I think a lot of times we can feel we're not prepared, we're not ready. And so 90% of us have self-sabotaging habits such as procrastination, negative self-talk, all these things. And these things absolutely affect finances, not just relationships and not just our self-esteem, but also finances.
Yeah, it's like that idea of abundance, what is abundance and how it is kind of like an energy and it flows around us and through us, and like, even if you ever watched The Secret, I'm sure you're someone who was watching
Yeah,
The Secret.
sure.
She's really, really interesting. And, she was bankrupt basically and used all of her money on this documentary. And that there was a point where I was watching one of her documentaries and she said that she had taken money out of her on a credit card and she just went into the streets and she had $20 bills and she was just handing them out to people, right? That she could
Yeah.
feel she needed the money, right?
Yeah.
And that it's like an energy signature that money has to flow from one place to another or it gets stuck and static. And
Yeah.
you see that show up when people don't, donate or don't, they're holding on to their money where something will happen, like a car accident or like there's a lawsuit or somewhere where they have to spend the money because the money has to flow. And I always thought that was
Yeah.
like an interesting concept.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing how we hold on to something. It's just, I mean, at the end of the day, like, when we die, we're not going to take anything with us anyway. So it's just being as open-handed as we can, and we're here to receive and here to give. And I think it's what's wonderful.
So what kind of things are you passionate about? What are some of your, are you donating some of your real estate or do you have any nonprofits you work with?
Yeah, so I had a moment, this was about 5 years ago, where I was in the room. There's a woman named Christine Kane who works with an organization called A21, and they do rescues all around the world. And she shared this story. I won't get into all of it, but she shared the story of this girl who was a teenager who was being rescued in Greece, who was from North Africa. This girl was, and when a lot of times they're very traumatized, and so she didn't realize she was being rescued. But when she was finally realized she was being rescued, like she didn't know if these are also traffickers as well. But she was, okay, these people actually are rescuing me. What she said with tears in her eyes, like, well, why didn't it come sooner? And for me, being a dad, I have a daughter who's 12, and just thinking, like, there's nothing I wouldn't do to help her or protect her, but her family, this girl's family, couldn't do anything, right? And so I just realized, like, that's a cause that's worth living and dying for. And so I really, my big, hairy, audacious goal that I want is to try to end modern day human slavery in the world. So there's over 20 to 40 million human slaves today. Hard to believe, more than there's ever been in the history of the world. So people don't think that's true, but it is. So sexual human slavery, labor slavery, there's all kinds of stuff. And so it's just, until we actually, create awareness, we do more about it. And it's just, the more I learn about it, it's a big, hairy, audacious thing. And I just keep trying to find ways to give and support it, and, create awareness, and whatever I can do, even for one or two people or one area of the world, I want to do that.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I have a daughter who's 11, as well. So it's really fascinating how it's grown so fast. I think with the internet, and before, people kind of thought that if they were these, pedophiles or creeps, that they were alone, right, in their little silo. And now the internet and the dark net, and there's all these groups, and they feel like they have camaraderie, and that they're not, sick, twisted humans, and that they're now, like, expanding and sharing, and it's one of the dark sides of the of online.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting time, but it also, I feel like humans were very, uh, if we care about something, we can stop something. And I think we're not only bright enough, we're motivated enough, we can get it done. It's just, we've got to really take effort to go down and do whatever we need to do. And I think it's just bringing things in the light that are happening in secret. So.
So, tell me a little bit about your what was I gonna just I just lost my train of thought. We'll have to cut that out. I started thinking about what you're telling me, and I'm like, wow, it's just shocking how many people are impacted. So, talk to me about sales. So you came out of being a consultant for medical devices, and what are some of those sales strategies that you've now brought into your new targeting of real estate? How do you sell this concept?
Yeah. So, well, I think, when it comes to sales, I mean, what I realized pretty quickly, and anybody who's been in sales, I mean, there are people that really believe that sales as a skill is the best skill to have, because if you can sell yourself, you can sell your ideas, you can do anything. So for CEOs, or just in general, like, having sales is awesome, right? Because it means you can convince people about, hey, I have this great vision, and you're like selling other people on the idea, which to get people excited about, which is great. When I first started in sales, I would just go and, hey, let me tell you about all this. And I just kind of, like, we call it feature and benefit. Just, oh, I got this. And this was in medical device sales. And it wasn't working at all. Like, I was like, I'm not even getting past the front desk. I was like, and so then I learned, I just kind of did some study. I started to change my approach, where it was like, instead of, like, just pitching what I have, let me go ask questions and just learn how people are addressing problems that they have. And so I started saying, well, how do you deal with this problem? Do you guys work with this? Well, what are you doing there? Well, have you thought about this? And then they'd tell me all this stuff. And then they'd be like, who are you again? And then I'd be like, well, I actually help solve this problem, whatever. So, like, I've realized really good salespeople are not salesy, right? So salesy is like, you go to a car lot and, hey, you look great in this nice 1972 Buick, right? And it's like, I don't want to, like, what are you saying? That's not me. Like, don't talk, but nobody wants to be sold, but everyone wants to be, everyone wants to be a buyer. Everyone wants to buy. So how do we help people in a way that they can express their needs? And sometimes it means, like, I refer people to, someone else. I say, hey, that I can't help you, but this person over here can really help you. Right. And that's very high trust. Or, sometimes it's saying, like, hey, maybe I don't oversell it. I say, hey, here's a deal that didn't go well. Let me tell you about that. Right. And then, just the more real I can be on something, sometimes it just makes, there's so much fluff and just kind of fake stuff online and just people out there, that if you can just kind of show up as a real person, and people can relate to you, and just be like, hey, like, this person is just kind of being who they are, and I like them. I think I can trust them, right? I think it's, people have to know, like, and trust you in sales. And I ask, like, which is the most important? Like, if I asked you, Anna, which is the most important, know, like, or trust?
Trust.
Most people say trust, and it is, in a way, people won't work with people they trust. But I would say, for sales, if somebody's trying to sell, the number one thing is no, because 99.9% of people don't know who you are, right? So if I want to sell something, I've got to get myself out there. And that feels vulnerable. I've got to put myself out there. I've got to say things that like, not that I'm over promising, but I'm just kind of being honest. Or like for me, a personal thing I can talk about, I went through a divorce 7 or 8 years ago. Like I said, deals maybe didn't go well in a certain way. Those are things that are vulnerable, but I share those things. And then people are kind of drawn to that. And so it helps people get to know who I am. And so I think if anybody wants to grow in that skill, I just think it's a process of, it is high trust, but it's just continuing to put yourself out there, and it can feel uncomfortable, but that's where the growth is.
Yeah, I think that that's true. So, we're both book authors. Why did you decide to write your first book?
Yeah, the reason I wrote the first book, actually was at a Tony Robbins event, and I've been wanting to write a book for a while. And then he says it's in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. So I said, I'm going to write this book. And so then I committed, and I really wanted to write it because I've had so many conversations with people that have money, but they're not free. Again, I have a couple physicians I work with that were making over $2 million a year each, but their expenses, it was a time for money trade. They were doing, 60 to 80 hours a week, weren't taking many vacations. I just thought, that doesn't feel like freedom to me. And so let's write a book about how do you, because if you just simply take your money and you put it in the traditional methods of Wall Street, and I was an investment advisor for a couple of years, and now I'm a recovering investment advisor now, but it's just like, it doesn't really provide the freedom of time that we really need and we really want. So I think that's really the biggest reason. And then I just felt I want to give people a guide of like, I know I should do this. How do I get started? What should I do? Why is what I'm doing not working? Why is Wall Street really not out there to help me? And if I do want to get into alternative assets, how do I start generating some cash flow? And so that's what really the book's about.
And how are you going to market your book?
Well, I've already been marketing it. We became an Amazon #1 category bestseller in real estate. So we've sold several thousand copies. We've had 1,200 reviews, 1,100 reviews. So it's gone very well. It's opened up a lot of doors, which has been great. And probably about half our leads come from just the book itself. So, but that is the challenge. If you write a book, writing a book is easy. It's promoting is the hard part, right? So I think 90% of books don't sell more than 1,000 copies. So, but yeah, it's good. What's the name of your book, Hannah?
Oh, my first book was The Covert Code: Mastering the Art of Digital Marketing, and
All right.
that book. And that's also an Amazon bestseller in online advertising and digital marketing. And really, I wrote it because there's just so much fraud now, and it's growing. Just even since I wrote the book last year, the fraud has tripled. I mean, now we're
Wow.
reaching over 100 billion in digital fraud, and these are, it's Microsoft, it's Facebook, it's these big companies. They are deploying the bots to click on their own ads and inflate revenue.
Wow.
It's just getting worse. And now with, so hard to track these AI imposters because they mimic real humans. Before it was a lot easier. We could
Yeah.
kind of know that, all right, this click doesn't look like this click and that's non-human. But now, even with some of this deep faking and ability to even generate Zooms with people on them, it's
Yeah.
becoming, very, very scary for business owners. And so I wrote the book to provide kind of my ways to help them protect themselves in this growing need. And now I'm working on my second book, which is about the solar industry. So I thought it was really interesting what you said about oil and gas. I hadn't known that, but it's called The Solar Coaster. And
Okay.
it's because it goes up and down, and just follow anything in renewable space. But
Yeah.
even this yesterday, Sonova officially declared bankruptcy, and
Oh, wow.
what's going on with the tax credits. So there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening. And so the book is really for solar business owners. And, just to remind everyone that people are panicking now, like they do with real estate as well, right? Or any type
Yeah.
of change in policy. And there's a lot of changes happening right now with our current administration. But just to remind us that, there was a time where there was no tax credits on solar, and we still sold
Yeah.
solar. And there's been premium products, and we still sold those. And that just, we have to, the industry will survive. It's the strong that will make it based off their way of thinking and thinking differently.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. Well, that's great. I can't wait to check that out. Yeah, it's amazing how energy is such an interesting thing. But yeah, that sounds like a really great book.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, what are you most excited about for the future of real estate?
Yeah, so I think real estate in general, like I said, it's challenging now. I think real estate will come back. I think it is actually a good time right now. I think in investor sentiment, a lot of people are very cautious on real estate now because they've either invested and they're seeing some challenges, or it's just been much slower going than they would think. But I think in general, there's actually some of the tax breaks that real estate used to have are coming back. So there was the bonus and accelerated depreciation that they think on this new bill are going to come back. So that's exciting. And then I think we have when you're able to buy an asset using debt, using other people's money. For example, with real estate, if you put 20% down on a property and it appreciates by 20%, you don't have, a gain of 20%. You've got a gain of 100% of your equity, right? So there's some real advantages of doing real estate as you experience appreciation and cash flow over time. So I think that, when it comes to, high inflationary time, which I think that we're in, I mean, everything costs 50 to 100% more than it did, 4 or 5 years ago. It's just we see it at the grocery store, at restaurants, gas station, all that. So I think it's being in assets that you can, go from cash to asset to cash flow. I think that's what's really ideal.
Yeah, one thing that made me think when you said that is I have a friend, she's in Texas, and she's been trying to put an addition onto her home for years, right? And now it was COVID, and now finally they started, but now because of all the building materials going up, it's 20-30% more. Are you starting to see that that's going to become a factor in some of these investments that you're making on how you thought it was going to be profitable and over a certain period of time, but now because of maintenance fees and other types of factors, is it changing?
Yeah, so like I said, real estate right now it's very difficult because single family a lot of people are locked into, I think something like 40% or 50% of people have a 4% or less interest rate, right? So a lot of people have interest rate, and that's something like 30-40% of homes are owned in cash. So for people to sell a house and move somewhere else, it almost doesn't make sense because you're gonna be paying a 6.5, 7% plus interest rate. Is just a much higher amount. So the cost of debt is much higher. And then in multifamily or in bigger commercial real estate, a lot of what's happened, a lot of these prices have come down 20, 30, 40% in certain markets, which is good. But because of the interest costs, you're still not cash flowing very much. And then of course the costs of labor, costs of inflation, for all the materials, everything's gone up. So it's kind of squeezed the cash flow where rents have not gone up accordingly, right? You'd think rents would come up, and they will. They will eventually start going up again, and it depends on the market and those kind of things. But so I think it is good long term. I mean, I think we know that if you look at a chart, there's a chart from Mother Jones. People can search it. It's if you search rent and inflation, Mother Jones, you can see it's almost a direct correlation of over time since the 1960s that rents move just kind of hand in hand with inflation. So as inflation costs continue to rise, rents will continue to rise, which creates the cost of real estate to go up as well. So we know long term it's going to look really good. Right now it's kind of this weird disequilibrium time where it's like it's hard to have deals really make sense because of the higher cost and because of the cash flow not being there. But over time, we know it will come back. So I think the outlook is very good over the long term. I think in the short term, we're kind of waiting on that and doing other deals that we are finding more cash flow in currently.
I know that they say that weather has a memory, right? That's why a lot of big events happen in the same locations, geolocations. Is the same, I mean, are you using any predictive AI models to try to determine where, opportunities might exist for future investment?
Yeah, so in my book Fire Yourself, we talk about this from any asset, right? So you can basically go to car washes or in a specific market for real estate. So you can say in Dallas, Texas, or whatever market. You find out what areas are growing, and it actually changes. There's reports that come out every single year of what's the top market for this year. It's this specific market, and then a lot of people move to that market, and so it kind of like it can change a bit. But I think there's a saying, live where you want and invest where the numbers make sense. So we live in California. We don't own anything in California, right? We do everything else for a number of reasons. But again, as an investor, you really have some choices on what your goals are. If you're a high earner and you're paying more than $50,000 a year in taxes, that might be role number one: is how do I reduce my taxes? Right? I know people that pay $500,000 a year in taxes. I'm like, man, you're just giving a lot back, right? There's ways you can help structure that, or investments you can do like oil and gas that can help you reduce your taxable basis. Then if other people are like, hey, I do want to fire myself, I do want to leave my job, I want cash flow. Well, then there's investments like buying businesses or debt funds or the things that help provide cash flow, right? So it's really kind of figuring out what your goals are. And then if somebody just needs, capital preservation or wealth preservation, he wants to have some stable, long-term real estate is great because it helps preserve cash. It grows with inflation over time. You don't necessarily need the cash for a retirement account or other types of things, which you can use to invest in some of these type of investments. So I think it really depends on what people's goals are, but I'm one that's like, hey, figure out what your goals are and then figure out what asset does those things, right? So I don't just fall in love with real estate or fall in love with oil and gas or fall in love with, businesses. Like, well, what makes the most sense right now as an investor for me? And then I do that if it makes sense for me. But sometimes, like a few years ago, real estate to me made a lot more sense than it does right now. But again, we will get into more real estate in the future. It's just we're going to kind of wait until we see the right opportunity for that.
Right. Well, I guess my that's been fascinating talking with you. I've got one more question. So, for our listeners, beyond thinking and with an abundant mindset and realizing that you're worthy of this achievement that you're after, what other tip can we give people to start rewiring their brain to think the right way, to be a rich brain?
Yeah, yeah. So I think for having a rich brain, I think it's so important to figure out what it is you want in your life, what it is you want to create, and just really do spend the time, journaling, identifying what is it I want? What are the things that if money and time were no issue, where would I want to live? What would I be doing? And then just see yourself as that person. And it'll just trickle down in your life that eventually I've known people that have done this. I know a guy's worth over $500 million in his 80s, and he's like, I just did this over the years. And he's like, I visualized the jet, and then this happened, and it showed up, and I visualized this, and it's like, so it really works. It seems kind of weird, but again, you have to figure out what you want, what's really important, and I think if you can tie it to a purpose, if it's just like I just want a jet just for the sake of a jet, well, that's not as powerful as, hey, I want to have this sort of impact in the world, and I want to I want to stand for this cause. And by me having wealth, that allows me to do that, right? That's super powerful, right? And people can sense that as well.
Wow. I got just chicken the skin thinking about that. I'm 100% in agreement with you. Well, thanks so much for being a guest today. And to learn more about Bronson, you can visit bronsonequity.com.
I actually have a free gift for your audience. I just completed a guide I created in 2025. Things are changing with tariffs and all these things, and I have my 3 favorite cash flow investments, and I have a free guide. It's 10 pages. I'll share it with your audience for free. You text the word cash flow to 33777. So you just text the word cash flow to 33777. It's my blueprint on what are some options today to be able to start generating some cash flow.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. And to all of my listeners, please join me next week as I interview another industry expert on a topic to help you succeed on and offline. I'll see you in the pixels. Aloha. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code podcast. To stay up to date with all our future episodes, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means everything to us. Please take a moment to leave a review and share our content with your friends and colleagues on social media. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more digital innovators like yourself. See you in the pixels. Aloha.